What is up, my holiday time trunk slamming friends? It's Monday, Spicy Monday, the holiday bonus. Kind gesture or cursed expectation that sometimes leaves employees grumbling like Clark Griswold. Today, we're breaking down why your holiday bonus might not be the blessing that you think it is, especially if you're running an MSP. And of course, we're taking lessons from the ultimate holiday cautionary tale, National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation. If you've never seen Christmas Vacation, this probably won't make too much sense to you. But if you have seen it, you know where this is going. Clark Griswold is expecting a cash bonus. He gets one every year. He's got plans, big plans. He is already spent it on a pool. But when the envelope finally does arrive late, at the very end of the movie, it is not cash. It is a subscription to the Jelly of the Month Club. He's mad. His family's mad. His brother-in-law kidnaps his boss. Who hasn't been there before? Classic Christmas movie. But if you think about it, this isn't just, movie magic or a National Lampoon movie being silly. It's actually a pretty accurate take on employee psychology. And it's funny that a movie that's that many decades old still holds up so well with that concept. When companies give out bonuses year after year, especially when those bonuses are not directly tied to a demonstrable performance metric that the employee can calculate in your absence, employees start to expect the bonuses as part of their salary. And then when we layer in, there's no performance, no tracking, just we've always done it, it's mine now. And when the bonus doesn't come, or when it's different, or when the number isn't the number I thought it should be, or when it's exactly what it should be, but someone else doesn't get the number that they should have gotten, because employees do talk, emotions go off, and suddenly you are kidnapped and dragged to somebody's house on Christmas or whatever holiday you are celebrating. And no one wants that. Towards the beginning of this movie, Clark works for what is implied to be medium business. And we know that it is a medium business because Clark still works directly for a boss and owner. That owner is shown throughout the movie to live in a, very nice, normal house and have a normal life. So this is not some massive enterprise corporation. This is not Nakatomi Towers that we're talking about here. This is a large or medium-sized business. And it is implied, and this is important because it's going to help break down one of the first issues we have to. It's implied throughout the movie that Clark's boss lives well. And the whole premise here is that basically everything's ruined. And when Clark's boss is kidnapped by his brother-in-law and brought to his house, what's amusing is when his wife gets there and the SWAT team gets there, after the premise of why he was kidnapped is explained, they also look at the boss as basically, wow, you asshole. How could you do this? How could you do something so unfair to everybody? And also, that was the first movie that taught me that there's apparently a large section of this country that has completely unfinished and uninsulated attics that they just store stuff in an area that's full of humidity that you shouldn't. And I didn't realize that was a normal thing. It's important, having talked about the movie, to also talk about sort of the problem statement here a little bit. So typical at an MSP or small medium business is this idea that at the end of the year around the holidays, we want to do something nice for our employees. And so we give out some sort of cash-based bonus. And in most cases, this bonus, as it occurs only at the end of the year, and we are not, 80s movie finance companies, it's not tied to anything other than the owner's opinion or goodwill or maybe some arbitrary algorithm for handing out cash, but it's not tied to anything. There's no performance metric associated with it. Generally, it is perceived as free money. I know money isn't free, but you get my point. Like it's unearned extra money that is given out. This style of bonus giving can be really problematic for any small business. And at your MSP, it can create actually more problems than it will solve. I do want to make clear, I am not anti-bonus. This is not a video. If you give out a holiday bonus, I'm not trying to convince you to stop. And if you don't give out a holiday bonus, I'm not trying to convince you to start. I'm just trying to explain critically some of sort of the psychological and emotional and practical disadvantages you have by doing it this way. I think the very first area this brings us to is a typical employee at a small or medium business generally does not really understand how business finances work, even at a basic level. And I don't mean to say that your employees are stupid. It's just not something anyone's ever bothered to learn. They generally have a sort of like movie or TV level of knowledge around how the money works, and that absence of real understanding. And then given the fact that we don't generally take the time to teach our staff this or publish the information for them, leads to a lot of false and misconceptions about where that money is going. So an example, in a business, bonuses are going to come out of profit. And so what is profit? Well, revenue minus expenses is profit. That's a very simple equation. But I guarantee you a lot of your staff don't really understand those words properly. So they often think bosses have just piles of cash hidden in the back room. And to give kind of a reality check to those employees, if you're watching, revenue is not profit. Those are not the same numbers. The money the business is bringing in is not profit. It's not free money. It's not take-home money. It's not going in a swimming pool. After payroll, taxes, your tools, all those other things, and then all the expenses to keep the place running and everything like marketing, sales, and then in some cases, your owner's salary, which I guarantee was a lot lower than you think it is. What's left over is profit. That profit is what the bonus could come out of. And in most MSPs, that's not a very big number. It really isn't. And that doesn't mean your company's financially unhealthy. It's just the margins are thin on service businesses to begin with. There's not a lot of fun money left over. And I think that misconception is one of the first problems with a bonus, because if you've ever worked for a small business owner, they probably have a decent car. They probably have a decent house. They probably occasionally take nice trips with their families, because one of the reasons why you start a small business in many cases is to have a good lifestyle. And that sort of face value disambiguation between the quality and standard of life that the executives live versus the employees is something very palpable. And especially at a lot of other small businesses, that's very obvious. Think of like the real local small business owner owns a restaurant or a construction company or a hair care salon or something. In all those cases, the owner probably lives fairly well, or at least has the appearance of living fairly well. In this issue here, what's left over, not as much as you'd think. Employees, many MSP owners aren't even taking a salary. They're just using tax deductible expenses. That car is a business expense tax write-off. Same with a lot of other stuff. They may only be taking enough out of the company to pay basically their bills and maintain their standard of living. They likely do not have some crazy ass war chest of savings or a lot of disposable income. In fact, they may be as paycheck to paycheck as you are. And I don't say all this to make you feel bad for your boss. I say it to give you some context, because in that movie, Clark's boss wasn't necessarily being greedy. And the movie implies that based on the company and the suit and the harumph, and that he has an assistant and that he lives in a nicer house than other people, although Clark lives in a nice fucking house, that he must have a lot of money. And the fact of the matter is, whether that's true or not, we don't know. But employees are definitely going to project that assumption on you. And they're going to assume you have infinite money to hand out bonuses. So if you don't, or you don't hand out the right amount, right away you're setting yourself up for disappointment. So another common assumption, and we see this in the movie, that we always get a bonus. So employees start to treat it as part of their salary. This is one of those things that is, from a practical and rational standpoint, completely ridiculous. And the employee is totally at fault for thinking this way. But pragmatically speaking, all humans think this way. If you have something that recurs over and over again, whether you agreed to get it or it was agreed to be provided to you or not, that is an ISLA, an implied SLA. And once an ISLA is established and those expectations are confirmed, even if they are confirmed anecdotally or organically or by osmosis, it doesn't matter. As soon as you take it off the table, you are hitting a relationship and you are hurting somebody's feelings. And so whether it is rational or not to consider the free money I get once a year as part of my salary, employees will start to feel that way. And there are two things you can't really get away with taking from an employee without hurting them. You really can't take back a title, and you can't take back compensation. And a recurring holiday bonus attached to nothing is perceived absolutely as compensation. And we saw that in the movie. Clark went and spent spent money he did not yet have on a pool because he was so firmly under the assumption that he was going to get this bonus. And then he even chastised his boss at the end to explain that employees here expect this as part of their salary, boss. You can't just cancel it without telling anybody. That's how ingrained that idea is. It's this weird perception that your employees will have, fair or not, around holiday bonuses or bonuses that aren't attached to performance metrics. And if we think about it practically, it's not part of their salary, which is not very intelligent, because if we do have a performance-based metric, well, then it is a part of their recurring compensation, and it means it's tied to an expected performance level, which means I can account for it at the beginning of the year. I could say, I'm going to pay Timmy here $65,000 a year, but I'm going to account for up to $10,000 a year in performance-based bonuses for Timmy. So Timmy's total possible salary for the year is $70K or $75K, and I budgeted for that. Rather than seeing what's left over at the end of the year and then handing that out. So even operationally, it is probably better if you agree with your employees on this one and do treat it as part of their salary. This brings us to another area of difficulty with giving out money in general, or with money, period, any type of money. There's this interesting thing I'm going to call the fairness dilemma you get dragged into as an employer, whether you're on board with this idea or not, and no matter how much work you've done to offset it, where your employees are going to talk about what they're being paid, their earnings, their benefits with each other. And on a quick side note, I've always found it to be one of the most adorably out of touch concepts when I've met executives that either expect their employees won't do that, ask their employees not to do that, or even try and mandate or enforce their employees can't do that, which isn't legal in most states anyways. Your employees are going to talk amongst each other what they got paid, what their bonus was. And this sets up a really weird situation. If we think about the holiday bonus explicitly as being free money, in that it was not part of somebody's salary explicitly, it was not a performance bonus, it was effectively unearned money that we are giving as a kind gesture because we can, if we sort of frame it that way, the nicest way to think of it. Your employees are still going to find a way to get butthurt about it every year, whether they tell you or not, from talking to each other. And it is the most insane thing I've ever witnessed over and over and over again. And I have seen it outside of just an employee thing. You give anybody free money and you run the risk of this happening, and it is wild. I have fallen victim to it, and I know you have fallen victim to it. If you would like a non-employment example, growing up, you probably had some relative that gave you money. And when you got that money did one of three things to you. It was either exactly what you expected, and in your mind was fair. It was more than you expected, and therefore was unfair in your benefit, or it was less than you expected, and it was unfair to your detriment. All of you have had that emotion around being given free money as like a birthday present, Christmas present, whatever. The same thing happens with bonuses. There's a difference though. When it's you as a kid, you don't really have a group of other people that can get riled up with you. You might have a sibling or two, and so maybe one of them gets more than you for something and you get a little upset. But usually you have parents, sort of have a third party area that can talk you out of it or explain it to you that is not the gift giver and is not your peer. You don't have that at work. And at work, well, employees are going to do the exact same thing they did with that Christmas or birthday money example. And it can weirdly get Lord of the Flies up inside your business because of that. If you do a flat rate bonus, in other words, everybody gets the exact same bonus or the exact same percentage or whatever you're using to figure out how much free money to hand out, if it's the same across the board, well, right then and there, people are going to get upset. And they're going to get upset because there are people in your organization that are going to perceive that even though everybody got the same amount, they somehow contributed to the organization in a way that should have warranted them more. I can give you a great example of that. When I was a service manager, especially earlier on in my career, if I had gotten the same amount of bonus as everyone else, I would have kept my mouth shut about it because I was a manager, but internally I would have been mildly aggravated. Well, now think about somebody who didn't have the level of context that I did and the fact that they were a manager. They're going to just feel just as aggravated, and they're going to tell one of their friends. And then one of their friends who wasn't aggravated is now going to get aggravated on their behalf. And before you know it, half the room is aggravated about objectively nothing, but they're aggravated. And the whole thing is taking a relationship hit and can easily be framed around you. Why didn't you do this better? Why didn't you assess it better? Why did this person get so much? Why did this person get so little? Even though everybody got exactly the same amount. Humans are irrational like that. And understanding that it's irrational doesn't dismiss the fact that they're going to be irrational about it. But let's say that you don't give a flat bonus and instead you have some sort of internal algorithm you run to assess bonuses, maybe based on time served or contribution or position, which is very common. Well, once again, people are going to talk about it. And that's even worse because now if I don't explicitly know and agree with why Timmy got more or less than I did, I am going to get worked up when I hear about it. I've been here for 10 years and Timmy's been here for 1 year and I get more because I've been here longer. If everybody understands that, they also have to agree with that. And they may not, because what if Timmy is perceived to put in a shitload of effort? What if I'm perceived to be a slacker? So right away, they may feel that's unfair. I'm not saying there isn't some formula you can arrive at that will be treated as fair, but it's incredibly challenging to arrive at a way to distribute money like that once discussed, if they understand the rationale and agree with it, maybe you have a chance that they won't go full Lord of the Flies and half the office won't descend into chaos. But odds are that people are going to grumble. And I think the thing that a lot of owners write off is the staff won't grumble directly to the owner in most cases, because your staff are not trying to be shitty. They understand somewhere in the back of their head that this was a gift. And so there is that element of, well, it would be rude of me to complain too much about a gift. But it doesn't mean as a group they don't feel slighted and upset, and that sticks with them. And that emotional relationship hit will carry forward the next few weeks or months, and all they need is something else to happen to support that. And before you know it, the organization starts to turn against being in support of you in a very subtle way. I don't mean a massive riot, because if you're not a shithead of a business owner, they're not going to riot. But the point is, you probably didn't make everybody as happy as you thought you did over the holidays with a system like this. And I want you to think of the fact that in a company where cohesion of team dynamics and collaboration are important, but less essential to the quality of service delivery. Because let's face it, like as much as we like to talk about maturity, most MSPs, even the good ones, are not very mature in terms of rigid adherence to a playbook. So the quality of your staff and their ability to get along with each other and share knowledge collaboratively is typically what makes our service delivery at an MSP go from acceptable to excellent. That really does mean everybody on the team kind of has to get along and not be upset at each other most of the time. This type of situation where you're giving out a kind gesture that isn't tied back to something tangible can lead to employees basically generating this subtle, low-level internal toxicity where the team dynamics and collaboration are so critical to the delivery and quality of our service, and it starts to erode at that slightly. I'm not saying it's unrecoverable or it's going to destroy your company. Just why do that? Why take that hit at all? Remember that bonuses should really be tied to performance metrics and not just because bonuses whenever possible. Try to tie in the projected bonus, even if it is going to be yearly, which I don't think is a smart idea, but if it's going to be yearly, you should be able to predict at the beginning of the year what that component as salary should be and budget for it ahead of time so that you are able to remove a surprise factor of not having enough or having too much left over and going under or over. Consistency is key here if you are going to do this. You cannot go wildly high one year and low next year. People will get upset. Keep in mind that implied SLA, that ISLA, and the problem it can have on employee morale, even though objectively it is ridiculous because you are objectively doing something that was not agreed to. It doesn't matter. It can still have a hit on employee morale. Be transparent about your finances at your MSP when possible and understand that not every employee is going to really understand everything you're saying or have the same context around the words. There is a fair amount of sort of like movie and TV understanding of how economics work. And if I ask an average MSP employee, do you understand, that the revenue minus expenses equals profit? Probably a lot of them would nod their heads and say, yeah, of course. That doesn't mean they actually understand it, or at least understand it the way we understand it. So that's important to keep in the back of your head. So if you are able to give some sort of explanation as to the bonus rationale or the method of calculation, that can be really helpful. better to just tie it to performance. But, in the absence of doing that, giving everybody some sort of idea how you arrived at this and what number it came out of and how that was allocated, that can be really helpful. Consider, in general, alternative forms of appreciation. If fundamentally you usually have extra profit, which isn't really a thing, but you have profit left over at the end of every year that you want to give out as a bonus to all your employees, and you already know this, and this is already your plan, and it's something you try to do every year. You just wait until the last minute to do it. Well, as I said, budget for it. And if you're not going to budget for it and tie it to a performance-based metric, then at the beginning of the year, budget for it and consider other ways to deliver that same value more consistently. Spot bonuses, smaller bonuses throughout the year for performance, public recognition of achievements. I'm not that guy that's going to advocate that you give your employees, a half-hearted pizza party at the end of the year. But there's other ways to recognize everybody and make everybody feel valued, appreciated, and that you were a kind boss without falling into this trap of now having to cut a check every year or else. If you think about it, the Jelly of the Month Club compared to the bonus was shitty. But that's not the worst gift. If you think, it's a subscription gift. Every month for a year, I get a gift in the mail from you, which is kind of nice. And maybe something a little bit that's a little more heartfelt and dialed into my interests than, jam or jelly. But the point being that, if that's your personality as an owner, you want to recognize your employees, why not recognize them a little more consistently? And once you start doing that, well, then why not pick a goal that they all hit pretty easily and softball the thing in, but find a metric they hit every month that you're proud of and just start tying the bonus to that slowly. And even if it's technically still free money, you're starting to put a concept in your employee's head that their output is what is producing that reward directly, rather than allowing them to wildly try and perceive how you arrived at giving out that money. Have a fantastic Monday. Stay spicy, my friends. The holiday bonus, is it a curse or a gift? Drop your wildest holiday bonus story in the comments. The crazier, the better. Thank you for watching. If you abducted your boss, I want to know about it.